In the heated political environment of 2025, the courtroom became the battlefield where two powerful legal minds clashed. Pam Bondi, the U.S. Attorney General, and Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York. The conflict centered around a contentious issue that had been brewing for years: the fight over immigration enforcement and sanctuary laws in the United States. This legal showdown would not just determine the fate of New York's policies, but would have far-reaching implications for the broader national debate on the scope of state power versus federal control. At the heart of this legal confrontation was New York's green light law, which allowed undocumented immigrants in the state to obtain driver's licenses. The law also made it more difficult for federal authorities to access state records and share information about individuals with immigration enforcement agencies. Bondi, representing the federal government, called this an outright violation of the Constitution. According to her, the law conflicted with federal immigration policies and undermined the effectiveness of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE) operations. For Bondi, enforcing federal immigration laws was non-negotiable, and she wasn't afraid to go head-to-head with state officials like James to make her point. Letitia James, on the other hand, defended the green light law as an essential protection for immigrant communities living in New York. James argued that the federal government's immigration policies, especially under the Trump administration, were inhumane and unfairly targeted immigrants, many of whom were contributing members of society. She contended that New York had a responsibility to protect its residents and ensure that undocumented immigrants could live and work without fear of deportation. In February 2025, Bondi took the bold step of filing a lawsuit against New York's Governor Kathy Hochul, Attorney General Letitia James, and several other state officials. The lawsuit claimed that the green light law obstructed the federal government's ability to enforce immigration law, specifically by preventing federal authorities from accessing driver's license records. Bondi's legal team argued that the law violated the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution, which states that federal law takes precedence over state law in areas of conflict. As the lawsuit made headlines across the country, it also sparked a political firestorm. Bondi's move was widely seen as a direct challenge to New York's sanctuary policies and an effort to curb the growing trend of states enacting laws that shielded undocumented immigrants from federal enforcement. The case quickly gained national attention as it represented a larger ideological battle between those who favored strict immigration enforcement and those who sought to offer protections to immigrant communities. The timing of the lawsuit was also critical. It came in the midst of increasing political pressure for the Trump administration to take stronger action against sanctuary cities and states. The White House had long argued that these policies were undermining national security and enabling illegal immigration. Bondi's actions were seen as an extension of the administration's broader agenda to challenge states and localities that were defying federal immigration laws. It was clear that this was not just a legal issue but a deeply political one as well. Meanwhile, Letitia James did not back down from the challenge. Her office immediately filed a counterclaim asserting that the green light law was fully constitutional and was within New York's right to protect its residents. James argued that the law was essential for public safety, allowing undocumented immigrants to register their vehicles and obtain insurance, which made roads safer for everyone. She emphasized that the law did not grant illegal immigrants any special privileges but rather ensured that they could live without the constant fear of being targeted by ICE. James also pointed out that immigrants were integral to the state's economy, contributing to sectors like agriculture, construction, and hospitality. By allowing them to obtain driver's licenses, New York was simply providing them with the opportunity to live their lives without the constant threat of deportation hanging over their heads. The case quickly turned into a high-stakes battle that would test the limits of state and federal authority. The political ramifications of this battle were enormous. If Bondi won, it could set a precedent for federal control over immigration enforcement, potentially leading to the unraveling of sanctuary policies across the country. On the other hand, if James prevailed, it would send a strong message that states had the power to enact their own immigration laws, even if they conflicted with federal policy. The outcome of this case had the potential to reshape the national conversation on immigration law and state sovereignty. As the courtroom drama unfolded, both sides prepared for a long and contentious legal fight. Bondi's team prepared a strategy focused on constitutional arguments, while James's legal team focused on defending the state's right to protect its residents and ensuring public safety. The stage was set for a showdown that would have lasting consequences for U.S. immigration policy. As the legal battle raged on in the courts, the political fallout from the lawsuit grew more intense. Pam Bondi's lawsuit against New York's green light law quickly turned into a national spectacle, with both sides pulling out all stops to sway public opinion. Bondi's supporters, mainly from conservative and pro-enforcement circles, rallied behind her. They saw her as a defender of national security and a strong advocate for upholding the rule of law. In their view, New York's law was not just an act of defiance against federal authority. It was a reckless policy that endangered American citizens by allowing illegal immigrants access to essential services without facing the consequences of their unlawful status. For Bondi, the green light law was emblematic of a larger problem, a growing network of so-called sanctuary states and cities that shielded undocumented immigrants from deportation and federal law enforcement. Bondi's legal team painted New York's policies as not only dangerous but a deliberate attempt to undermine federal laws that were in place to protect the country's borders. They argued that allowing people in the country illegally to obtain driver's licenses was a step too far and represented the erosion of U.S. sovereignty. Bondi, with her political ties and influence within the Trump administration, wasted no time in framing the case as part of a broader ideological war between those who wanted to enforce immigration laws and those who wanted to undermine them. Her rhetoric echoed the sentiments of President Trump's supporters, who viewed immigration as a key issue that would shape the future of the country. The message from Bondi's camp was clear: states did not have the right to refuse federal immigration laws, and any attempt to do so would not be tolerated. On the other hand, Letitia James and her team presented a very different perspective. James framed the green light law as a progressive policy that prioritized the well-being of all New Yorkers regardless of immigration status. For James, the issue at hand wasn't just about driver's licenses, it was about human rights, dignity, and public safety. In defending the law, she argued that immigrants in New York were integral to the state's economy and public life, and policies that helped them live without fear were essential. James's approach was rooted in a belief that the federal government's policies toward immigrants were unnecessarily harsh and punitive. She argued that President Trump's administration had waged a relentless attack on immigrant communities, and the green light law was New York's way of pushing back against what she described as the inhumane treatment of immigrants. In a powerful statement to the press, James emphasized this law isn't about rewarding illegal behavior. It's about protecting the rights of people who are living, working, and contributing to our communities. We won't back down from this fight. The case became not just a legal battle but a proxy war between two visions of America. Bondi's defenders saw her as standing up for the rule of law and the Constitution, while James's supporters viewed her as a champion of immigrant rights and state autonomy. Both sides dug in, prepared for a lengthy and bruising legal fight. Public opinion divides. The lawsuit and the subsequent media coverage led to a nationwide debate about the role of states in shaping immigration policy. On one side, critics of the green light law pointed to the dangers of providing benefits to undocumented immigrants. They argued that allowing people who were not authorized to be in the country to obtain driver's licenses was a step toward normalizing illegal immigration. Many conservatives saw Bondi's legal action as a necessary move to restore order and protect American citizens. On the other hand, those who supported the green light law viewed it as a necessary safeguard against an overreaching federal government. Many Democrats, progressives, and immigrant advocacy groups rallied behind Letitia James. They argued that Bondi's lawsuit was part of a broader campaign to criminalize immigrants and sow division in American society. For these groups, the green light law represented a step toward ensuring that all residents, regardless of their immigration status, could live without the fear of being torn away from their families. The polarized nature of the debate only grew as more details of the lawsuit became public. Bondi's camp continued to hammer home the idea that New York's law was a threat to national security, while James's team emphasized the human rights aspect of the issue. For James, the lawsuit wasn't just about winning in court, it was about sending a message that New York would not be intimidated by the federal government when it came to protecting its immigrant population. As the case proceeded, the legal arguments became more refined and the stakes grew higher. Bondi's legal team focused heavily on constitutional principles, particularly the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution, which holds that federal law takes precedence over state law in cases of conflict. Bondi's attorneys argued that the green light law directly conflicted with federal immigration enforcement and therefore it was invalid. Bondi's team also pointed to the argument that New York's law prevented federal immigration authorities from accessing crucial information about undocumented individuals, which they claimed impeded their ability to carry out their duties effectively. For Bondi, the law wasn't just about state rights, it was about enforcing federal law in the face of what they considered an unlawful attempt by New York to block federal action. In response, Letitia James's legal team framed the lawsuit as an attack on New York's ability to make laws for the welfare of its residents. They argued that states had the constitutional right to set their own policies, especially when it came to issues like public safety and the well-being of their residents. They contended that the federal government's overreach was not only unconstitutional but harmful to state sovereignty. James's legal team took the position that New York had the authority to implement policies that served the interests of its population, particularly in the case of undocumented immigrants who, despite their status, contributed significantly to the state's economy. The green light law, they argued, was about ensuring public safety by allowing all drivers to register their vehicles and obtain insurance, essential services that contributed to safer roads for everyone. As the case continued, it became clear that the legal fight would have far-reaching consequences. A ruling in favor of Bondi would have serious implications for sanctuary policies across the country, potentially allowing the federal government to override state immigration laws. On the other hand, a ruling in favor of James could solidify the rights of states to enact their own immigration policies without interference from the federal government. While the legal arguments were unfolding in the courtroom, the public battle was raging outside it. Both sides engaged in extensive media campaigns to rally support for their positions. Bondi's team used conservative media outlets to frame the case as a fight for law and order, with Bondi cast as a defender of American citizens. Meanwhile, James's camp worked tirelessly to present the green light law as a moral imperative, a necessary protection for vulnerable immigrant populations. They utilized progressive media to frame Bondi's lawsuit as a politically motivated attack on the rights of immigrants. In the months leading up to the trial, public opinion remained deeply divided. A majority of Republicans and conservative-leaning voters sided with Bondi, while Democrats and immigrant advocacy groups rallied behind James. The case had become emblematic of the broader ideological divide in the United States over issues of immigration, state rights, and the role of the federal government. As the trial loomed closer, both sides braced for what was expected to be a highly contentious legal showdown. Bondi's camp, bolstered by the Trump administration's support, was confident that the courts would side with them. James, meanwhile, remained steadfast in her belief that New York's sanctuary policies were not only legal but essential for the well-being of the state's residents. As the courtroom drama unfolded, the national media closely tracked every development, amplifying the stakes of the case. The battle for public perception became just as significant as the legal battle itself. With each passing week, both sides escalated their rhetoric. Bondi, known for her sharp legal mind and her unyielding stance on federal immigration laws, spoke at rallies and interviews, emphasizing the need to restore order to the immigration system. For Bondi, this case was a matter of principle. States, she argued, could not simply disregard federal law because it didn't align with their own political agenda. At the same time, James focused her public statements on the humanity of the issue. She appealed to the emotional side of the debate, highlighting the countless immigrant families who lived in constant fear of deportation. By ensuring that undocumented individuals could access services like driver's licenses, she argued, New York was not rewarding illegal behavior but protecting its citizens and improving public safety. Her supporters rallied under the banner of human rights, immigration justice, and state sovereignty. James used her platform to paint Bondi's lawsuit as part of a wider attack on progressive values. She suggested that Bondi and the federal government were attempting to stoke division, using immigrants as a wedge issue to divide the country even further. To James, the case wasn't just a legal matter, it was a fight for the very soul of the nation. We are fighting not just for New York but for the idea that the United States is a land of immigrants, a place of sanctuary and refuge, she proclaimed in one of her high-profile interviews. Both sides knew the outcome of this case would reverberate beyond the courtroom. Bondi's allies argued that a victory for the federal government would serve as a powerful rebuke of sanctuary policies across the nation, potentially leading to more aggressive federal action against cities and states that opposed federal immigration enforcement. They believed that if the federal government could strike down the green light law, other states might reconsider their sanctuary policies or face similar legal challenges. On the flip side, James and her supporters were determined to defend the autonomy of states to shape their own laws. Winning this case would send a clear message that the federal government could not easily override state policies, especially in areas that impacted local communities. If James succeeded, it would solidify New York's sanctuary policies as a legal precedent and potentially inspire other states to enact similar protections for immigrants. As the legal battle unfolded, both sides were fully aware of the larger implications. For Bondi, this case was a crucial part of the ongoing struggle to reshape American immigration policy and reinforce the power of federal law. For James, it was a defining moment in her career, a chance to stand up for the immigrant communities that had long supported her and a way to challenge an administration that she believed had taken a harsh and unjust approach to immigration. Part 5. The Courtroom Showdown, a turning point for immigration laws. After months of legal maneuvering and intense public discourse, the day of the final hearing arrived. The courtroom was packed with reporters, activists, and legal experts, all keenly aware of the gravity of the proceedings. Inside, the tension was palpable as Bondi's team and James's defense squared off. This wasn't just a legal argument, it was a battle over what the future of American immigration policy would look like. Bondi took the floor, presenting her case with force and clarity. Her argument was simple: New York's green light law was in direct conflict with federal immigration enforcement policies, and that was a violation of the U.S. Constitution. She stressed the importance of national security, claiming that laws like New York's sanctuary policies allowed illegal immigrants to operate without oversight. For Bondi, this wasn't just about driver's licenses, it was about stopping the federal government from being powerless in the face of state-level defiance. We cannot allow states to carve out exceptions to federal law, Bondi argued. The very integrity of our immigration system is at stake here. New York has no right to shelter individuals from federal law enforcement. This lawsuit is not an attack on immigrants, it is an effort to restore the rule of law. James, in her rebuttal, presented a more nuanced view of the issue. She called Bondi's arguments a misrepresentation of what the green light law was meant to achieve. The law, James argued, wasn't about giving illegal immigrants special privileges, it was about ensuring that all New Yorkers, regardless of immigration status, could participate fully in society. She emphasized that the law had been enacted to enhance public safety by encouraging all drivers, legal or undocumented, to register their vehicles and obtain insurance. The federal government has a long history of overreach, and this lawsuit is just the latest example of that, James said. New York has every right to protect its residents and make laws that reflect the values of the state. We are fighting for the people of New York and for the safety and dignity of immigrant communities. This case is about far more than immigration, it's about what kind of nation we want to be. As the trial drew to a close, it became clear that the court would need to consider not just the legal arguments but the political and social ramifications of the case. A decision in favor of Bondi could lead to significant changes in how states handle immigration enforcement, potentially eroding the protections that many sanctuary cities and states had put in place. On the other hand, a ruling in favor of James could embolden progressive states to continue challenging federal immigration policies and pave the way for more state-based reforms in the future. The judge in the case, a respected federal judge with years of experience in constitutional law, promised to take the time needed to review the arguments. "This is a case of great importance," he said as the proceedings wrapped up. "The decision I make will not only affect New York but could have ripple effects across the nation." As the legal team gathered their documents and prepared for the long wait for a ruling, the political landscape had already shifted. Regardless of the outcome, this case had already ignited further debates over the future of American immigration policy. It also revealed just how divisive the issue had become in the public eye, with two of the country's top legal minds squarely on opposite sides of the issue.